I would like to say that you should all be smarter, but I don't know how you could be smarter. We don't know anything about how to improve intelligence, and I suppose we don't really know anything about how to improve industriousness either, but I can tell you that people who are industrious come up with a strategy for solving the problem that's ahead of them.
If you want to know something about yourself, sit on your bed one night and say to yourself, you got to mean this, like you got to be desperate. This is no game, this. What's one thing I'm doing wrong that I know I'm doing wrong, that I could fix, that I would fix? You meditate on that, you'll get an answer. And it won't be one you want, but it'll be the necessary one.
In this video, we'll explore some of his best-kept secrets for maximizing focus and achieving long-term success, so that you can study smarter, not harder.
Now, I often tell people too, fix the things you repeat every day, because people tend to think of those as trivial, right? You get up, you brush your teeth, you have your breakfast, you have your routines that you go through every day. Well, those probably constitute 50% of your life. And people think, well, they're mundane, I don't need to pay attention to them. It's like, no, that's exactly wrong. The things you do every day, those are the most important things you do. Hands down. All you have to do is do the arithmetic.
We make an average of 35,000 decisions every single day, which can eventually lead to decision fatigue, a state of mental overload that can impede a person's ability to continue making decisions. As psychiatrist Dr. Lisa McLean explains, the more decisions you have to make, the more fatigue you develop and the more difficult it can become. This mental exhaustion can lead to poor choices, procrastination, or even a tendency to avoid decisions altogether. One effective way to reduce decision fatigue is by simplifying daily routines, such as planning meals in advance, maintaining a consistent wardrobe, or establishing structured habits. Additionally, breaking down complex choices into smaller, manageable steps can make decision-making feel less overwhelming, helping individuals conserve mental energy for more important tasks.
I can tell you that people who are industrious come up with a strategy for solving the problem that's ahead of them, and then they do whatever they can to stick to the strategy. And so, for example, if you sat down today or tomorrow for a couple of hours, 3 hours, and you filled in a Google Calendar, whatever you happen to use, with a strategy for studying and a list of when all your assignments are due and all of that, and when you're going to sit down and study, then you won't be in a position where you have to cram for 10 hours a day hopelessly right before, an important exam. It's also a very ineffective way of studying, by the way. I mean, first of all, people who cram for 10 hours say they're studying for 10 hours, but they rarely are, because I can't study for 10 hours. I don't have the power of concentration that would enable me to do that for that prolonged period of time. I can manage about 3 hours of intense intellectual activity before I'm pretty done.
A study published in Frontiers in Human Neuroscience found that spaced learning, where study sessions are spread out over time, can be twice as effective as massed learning. This approach enhances memory retention and recall by encoding information into long-term memory. Research consistently shows that students who space out their studying perform better on assessments taken weeks later compared to those who cram. In addition to spaced learning, getting enough sleep plays a crucial role in learning and memory. According to the Sleep Foundation, sleep deprivation hinders the brain's ability to create new pathways for recently learned information, making it harder to retain knowledge.
And it's also the case that if you study and then sleep, and then study and then sleep, and then study and then sleep, you space it out, then you're much more likely to remember. It's also much more likely that you're much more likely to remember if you try to recall the material. And so highlighting and that sort of thing isn't very useful, but reading, closing the book, summarizing what you've read without opening the damn book, that's useful. And the reason for that is that you're practicing remembering. And that's what you have to practice. If you're practicing memorization, you have to practice remembering. You don't just go over the thing over and over. That'll help you with recognition memory, but it won't help you with recall memory. The best thing you can do is read and write every day, a couple of hours every day. Write about things you find important and see if you can discover what you believe to be true. And that'll build you a foundation. And it's unbelievably practical.
Research published by Jackson V. Wagstaff of Brigham Young University explores how reading literary fiction enhances a person's ability to understand others, a skill known as the theory of mind. This refers to the human capacity to recognize that others have beliefs and desires different from their own. In the study, participants were divided into groups and assigned different reading materials. Afterward, they took a test measuring their ability to perceive others' emotions. The results showed that those who read literary fiction scored significantly higher than those who did not read at all.
So what seems to happen in stories is that they distill. So they watch people watch people, and then they tell stories about what they see, but they leave a lot out of those stories. Everything that's boring, hopefully. And then more and more stories about exciting things get sort of aggregated, and then maybe a great writer comes along and writes something really, really interesting. Profound character transformations. And then you say, well, that's fiction. And then you say, well, that's not true, because it's fiction. But then maybe that's not right. Maybe it's more than true. Because who wants the truth? The truth is mundane reality, and you've already got that mastered. What you want is the distillation of interesting experience. And you might think, well, why is it interesting? Well, the answer is you don't know. That's the thing that's so cool. When you think about behavior, you tend to think about voluntary behavior, but a motivational state will disinhibit or activate, depending on the situation, autonomic responses. So for example, when you're food deprived and you start to think about food and start to organize your behavior towards food as an end and to perceive the world that way, your body also prepares for food. And so it's useful to think about a motivated state as a micro-personality.
According to an article from Cognition Today titled "The Scientific Truth Behind Fake It Till You Make It," mental imagery and actual perception share common neural circuits, though they have different firing dynamics. This phenomenon is explained by Hebb's law, which states that neurons that fire together wire together. In other words, if you do something in association with something else, the two things will get interlinked at a neural level. This principle highlights the brain's ability to strengthen neural connections through repetition and association. For example, if someone repeatedly visualizes themselves speaking confidently in public, their brain starts to reinforce the same neural pathways used in actual public speaking, potentially improving their real-life performance.
Even when you're just walking to where you want to go, if you're successfully walking there, your brain tracks what you're doing. There's circuits that are activated while you're doing it. And if what you're doing results in the result you desired, then the dopamine floods those little neurons that are active and it makes them grow and flourish. And so as you practice something that's working, the circuit that is activated as you're practicing is bathed in dopamine, and that makes it stronger. And that feels good. It's growth. It's part of positive emotion. And so the positive emotion moves you forward, but also encourages you to develop a habit of that practice. And so one of the things I would bloody well say is, don't make a habit of pursuing things that aren't good for you, because you build that into you. That's what happens if you become addicted to something, you know. You build a little monster inside you that's grown, it's there, it's after one goal, despite everything else. Not a good outcome. You know, in order to withstand suffering, let's say your life has to have some meaning. Okay, well, that means a bunch of things. It means that part of the way that you overcome suffering is by making the suffering into something meaningful. And I don't mean that metaphysically, I mean it technically. You made a mistake, it causes you suffering, you learn something about it, you don't make that mistake again.
In a study on expressive writing with 258 participants, researchers found that those encouraged to embrace discomfort felt a greater sense of achievement and were more likely to incorporate expressive journaling into their daily lives compared to those who were simply instructed to focus on the task. Perceiving negative experiences as a sign of progress is particularly motivating when positive experiences are delayed and discomfort is immediate.
This is a life is suffering idea. It's like, why learn something? Because you're wrong. Who cares? It makes you suffer. You care. So, you know, if you run out a little scheme in the world, a little action pattern, you don't get what you want, especially if you're 2 years old, you burst into tears and cry. And why is that? It's because you don't know where you are, and you don't know what you're doing. It's like time for some negative emotion. It indicates that you're wrong. And that's terrible in some sense, because it almost always means that to learn requires pain. Now, I don't believe that exactly, because people are curious, you know, and to go out and be curious and to learn new things can be very exciting. And so what it seems to be is that there's a rate of learning that's too fast, and that hurts you. That's what makes you cry. But if you get the rate just right, you're just opening up enough novelty so that you can benefit from the possibilities. That gives you a dopamine kick fundamentally. You can benefit from the possibilities without being overwhelmed by the unexpected element of it, and you can tell when that's happening. And this is one of the coolest things as far as I'm concerned.